Today we're going to talk about something called CPCTC, which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Basically what it means is that if you have two triangles that are congruent, then any of their corresponding parts have to be congruent. So just for example, if you had these two triangles, ABC and DEF, and maybe they were congruent by angle, side, angle. So let's say we did a proof and this is what we have marked. After we know that those two triangles are congruent, any of their corresponding parts also have to be congruent. So you can see here that BC and EF are corresponding. So by CPCTC, we would know that those two parts would also have to be congruent. You're going to use CPCTC when you're asked to prove that sides or angles are congruent. But before you can use CPCTC, you always have to prove that the triangles are congruent first. So here are two examples of what the proofs will look like. So the first noticeable difference is before, our proof was always this triangle is congruent to this triangle. And in this first one, it now says this side is congruent to this side. So that's a pretty good indication that we're going to end up using CPCTC. These proofs start off just like the ones we've been doing from the beginning. So you're going to write out whatever they give you with the word given, and you're going to mark your diagram. I've been noticing that a lot of you are having trouble marking or you're not marking things correctly. So it's really important, make sure that you know how to mark. Again, if you're confused, use a highlighter. So if I'm marking angle KBC, you could just highlight those three letters and it outlines the angle that you're marking. When you're marking an angle, just a reminder, you're using an arc mark. And it goes in the vertex, that is always the middle letter. So for angle ACB, C's the vertex. Imagine in your head that you're highlighting. Hopefully you can see that the arc mark would go right here. The second given says angle K is congruent to angle A. That's another given. Another common mistake I've been seeing is that you're not double marking your angles. So just like sides, the first time you mark a side, you use one mark. The second time you mark a side, you use two. It's the same for angles. So the second time I mark an angle, it's a double arc mark. We are out of givens at this point, and so at that point you look for either vertical angles or a line that the two triangles share. These two triangles share BC, so we write BC is congruent to BC, and we call that reflexive. Since this is our first side, it gets one mark. After this, I'm able to prove the triangles are congruent. Now, the part that's new for you guys is you have to name the triangles yourself. So pick one of the triangles and name it however you want with the three letters. So the one that I started to outline in yellow, I'm going to choose to call that triangle KBC. And then it's just really important that we match up our marks. So if you look, KB goes from the double angle to the single angle. So I need to follow that pattern from double to single. So that would be A, C, and then B. Looking at our marks, we have two angles and a side. So this is going to be angle, angle, side. And then finally, we can prove now that those other two sides are congruent because CPCTC, which again stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles, are congruent. So then our second proof, it starts off the exact same way. We're writing down our givens and we're going to mark the diagram. So BA and DA are sides. And another thing, actually look for the letters and mark the correct side. Some of the homework last night, when I was checking your marking, you weren't even marking the correct letters. So make sure you're actually reading. So here's BA, and then here's DA. So they both get 1 mark. Second given, CA is congruent to EA. That's given. Again, second side gets double marks. Make sure you're reading the letters. So up here is CA, here's EA. The next thing I'm looking for is either a side that they share, which there isn't one, or vertical angles, which we always know that there's vertical angles in this bow tie picture. You cannot name these angles angle A. You have to use 3 letters. We know that A is going to be the middle letter because it's the vertex. Again, if you're having trouble, use a highlighter. So here it is, C-A-B. Second angle might be called E-A-D. Also, make sure you're not forgetting to write your angle symbols. Those are important. Now that we have marked 3 things on both triangles, we can prove that the triangles are congruent. Again, different from previously, we have to name the triangles. If you match up your marks when you name your vertical angles, you can really just name your triangles the same thing. So I'll just double check that I did that. So CA goes over the side with 2 marks, and then AB is the single. So if I call it CAB, I'm going from the double side to the single side. That'd be EAD. So I did name those correctly. And again, this time we are using a triangle symbol because we're talking about triangles. So the symbols are really important. Make sure that you are using those correctly. Then looking at your triangles, I marked a side, the angle in between, and then another side. So this is side angle side. And since I'm proving that 2 angles are congruent, I'm using CPCTC, which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.